Minguannan Indian Town was located here. The chief, Machaloha or Auhala, and his people of the Unami group, their totem, the tortoise, of the Lenape or Delawares, sold to William Penn the lands between Delaware River and Chesapeake Bay to the falls of Susquehanna River, October 18th, 1683, marked by the Pennsylvania Historical Commission and the Chester County Historical Society, 1924. Look, there's the turtle. Hey YouTube. Today we're going to talk about the Minguannan Indian Town. So somewhere in this crossroads where Sharpless Road meets South Bank was an Indian town. When the settlers first arrived, they built this Baptist church, which is called the London Tract Meeting House. Now, when I saw Meeting House, I immediately thought Quakers, but I guess they were Baptists. Now, I don't know if the Indian town was exactly where this Baptist church is located. Maybe it was somewhere over here. That's a park office. Maybe it was back there in that field. But in any case, figured we'd walk around this old graveyard. There are at least some Revolutionary War soldiers buried here that I want to check out their graves. Now we're here near White Clay Creek State Park. And White Clay Creek runs just down there in the valley. And that's somewhere down there is where the Indians used to live in these woods, and up here on this flat area, I believe. Wow, some of these graves are so old. They're just little nubs that are left. And there's our hero. Let's go check him out. David Eaton, who departed this life August 13th, AD 1813, in the 51st year of his age. Wow, what a beautiful headstone. Now it says doctor, so he must have been a doctor, right? Isn't that what that means? Doctor. And then here's his wife, consort, in memory of Mary Eaton, consort of Dr. David Eaton, who departed this life in 1843 at 81 years of age. Amazing. Some of these old gravestones are incredible. Look at that one. So there's a trail somewhere down there that I think might take us to the creek. So let's walk over that way. And while I walk over there, I'll tell you a little bit about the Minguannan Indian Town. As far as I could tell, I found out what I could. There seems to be somewhat sparse information, but here's what I know so far. There's the creek. That must be a little tributary. Now, the Minguannan Indian Town is situated right where the Arc of Delaware comes down and meets the border, the vertical border with Maryland, and the horizontal border with Pennsylvania. And that horizontal border is very special. That's the Mason-Dixon line. That's the southern border of Pennsylvania. Now, right where those borders meet, there was an Indian town named Minguanon. I don't know if the borders meeting there was intentional. My understanding of how the Arc of Delaware was laid out was that it was drawn in a 25-mile or 40-mile radius around Newcastle, Delaware. And I don't think it really had anything to do with the Indian town here at Minguanon. But somehow, just by happenstance, that arc met right where this town existed. And this town existed on White Clay Creek. And White Clay Creek is a major creek that feeds into the Delaware River. Now, what do I always say about where Indian towns are built? Say it with me if you know it. They're built where one body of water meets another body of water. And that little tributary that I showed you, that tiny creek, I think that's the body of water coming into White Clay Creek, you know? I think that makes sense. It's either that one or maybe this one. But I think this is more or less probably a ditch from the farmers' fields. And I think that other tributary I showed you earlier, that's the main creek. And at that juncture with this major White Clay Creek, that's where Minguanon was built. Boy, it'd be really great if I could figure out how to get over there and do some creek walking. But this is too deep for me and it's a little cold today. I could walk across in the rapids there, but I might have to come back here in the spring to do a proper hunt of that bank. So I wonder if you can tell, just looking at the landscape, there's a hill here, and the White Clay Creek comes from this direction, and it comes around this hill, and it curves, and it goes down that valley, out between this hill and that hill. And this hill comes down this way, and the little tributary I walked in on came in from that valley, and that hill is where the old church was. So there are 3 hills. 1, 2, and then 3. Now, just looking at the landscape, you can kind of see that there are 3 valleys that meet here. So at least 3 different ways in to this general location. And the landscape just funneled people into this spot. So it's a natural place where trails and creeks and people would have intersected. And over time, this sort of a location would be a perfect place for a village, and especially a village focused on trade. When the settlers arrived, the location of Minguanon, north of the Chesapeake Bay, and in proximity to a major creek that emptied into the Delaware, made it the perfect place for trade and for settlers to trade with the Indians out on the frontiers. There's a corn field, and here's a corn cob. It's always nice to see corn on native land, isn't it? Now, by the 1720s, 17 teens, most of the Lenape Indians of the Delaware and Philadelphia area had been pushed west and out of their native homelands, and only remnants of the group of Lenape who lived here still remained. But this town was one of the major places where the settlers and Lenape still interacted as late as 1730s. I think that makes sense. And then thereafter, from the 1730s to the 1750s, after the walking purchase, really, is when the Lenape eventually vanished from this area. Now, later in the 20th century, first in 1927, the Chester County folks who lived around here put that marker back by the church to mark the Indian town. And they took that big boulder out of the creek, which is kind of nice. So it's a boulder from the White Clay Creek with a nice bronze marker on it. And Unami tribe tortoise, which I don't know if it was a tortoise or a turtle. There's a difference. I think it's probably a turtle. But in any case, they put that symbol on there. And oh, look at this. Here's a beaver's been working on this tree. Check that out. Very cool. And later in the 20th century, there was some archaeology done, and one of the original village sites was rediscovered, more or less. You know, in the colonial period, when contact was made, this shifted the Native American site somewhere around closer to the roads. But this place has been inhabited most likely for thousands of years. Now, I have to say most likely because I haven't been able to find a date. I looked at some archaeology papers, or at least one paper, about the site that was discovered here at the confluence of White Clay Creek and that tributary, somewhere on the banks of this creek that I'm walking next to. Somewhere on the banks here, there was a village found, and I've looked at the paper and I don't see a date in the paper. But I need to look harder. Maybe I'll find one. But you know, as with every village in this area that was here before contact, pre-contact, it's probably thousands of years. You know, we don't have any reason not to. I am speculating, but I don't have any reason not to believe. I don't have any reason not to believe that it wasn't a long time ago. I mean, thousands of years, right? Stands to reason. Now there's some gunfire off in the background because someone's practicing what sounds like clay pigeon shooting to me. Oh, I wonder what that is. Look at that. Some sort of weather station of some sort. I don't know. Oh, okay. It's a stream. What does it say? Stream gauging station. United States Geological Survey. Cool. Now, way over there across the field is the ruins of an old farmhouse. It's probably colonial period. And that might have even been standing here when the Indian town was still full of Indians, or just after. Who knows? I'm just speculating. But that's an old house. Now, it's really not a good time of year to look for artifacts, but I bet this cornfield would be the perfect place to find any artifacts, especially after they've been tilled. Look at all the corn cobs on the ground. Why are these corn cobs here? You know? Are these just discards? These weren't good enough for harvest? I don't grow corn, so I don't know, but yeah. I don't really have permission to look, but I'm gonna take a gander anyway. Look at that. There's a little rock of some sort. Interesting. There's a nice deer print. Now, one of the other reasons why settlers probably settled here was due to the good farming, you know. When the settlers showed up, they really coveted the Native Americans' fields. The Native Americans cultivated corn. They cultivated squash and beans also. But corn, maize, as they called it, maize, was the staple crop for the Lenape, for the Susquehanna, for the Iroquois, for many of the tribes, the Shawnee. They all grew corn, and their fields were abundant, and they always knew where the best soil was for growing. And this town was more than likely than not, it was more likely than not it would have been supported by fields of corn. So it's possible that this cornfield has been here for thousands of years. I've been looking for a nice gravel bar to go hunt for artifacts on, but they're all across the water. It's kind of difficult to slide down here and get across, but maybe we'll keep going, and up that way I see some potential spots we can take a little look. We'll see. Okay, yeah, here we go. Let's take a look on that. Now I'm not too hopeful here, because this is what looks to me like the remnants of an old bridge. If you see here, there are a bunch of rocks there, a bunch of rocks there. It looks like there was a bridge crossing, so this is probably all fairly modern, but we'll take a little look and see what we can find. Oh yeah, wow, already, look at this. It's a nice piece. Now, is that quartzite maybe, or flint? I'm not sure. I have to get better at recognizing flint and chert. And wow, look at that, yeah. Oh, you can't see it. Sorry, I didn't have it in focus, in camera. Look at how beautiful that is. Look at this. Wow, that's a beautiful piece of quartz. It's see-through. Can you see that? That's beautiful. Jeez, look at this one. It's so pretty. Wow. Well, I'll be darned. Look at this one. Can you see that? Is that a piece of quartzite that's filled with gold? No, it can't be gold, right? That would be crazy. No. What's that one? It's an interesting old rock. Could be something. Probably not. I don't know. Look at that edge on that one. This could be something. That could definitely be an intentionally broken off edge, but I can't say for certain. So another thing while I'm looking around that I'm trying to keep my eye open for is pottery, because the Minguanon site was part of a larger complex of villages in this area, and it was known for pottery. When the archaeologists found the village on this part of the creek, they dug up thousands of pieces of pottery that had a specific corded ware design. And let's cut to the future now, and I'll show you a little bit about the pottery that was found here and the archaeological site.
Hey, Future Sean here. Okay, so I wanted to show you the lay of the land a little bit. You can see on the map, here's the Delaware River. This is the Chesapeake Bay, down in the lower left. And you can see the Arc of Delaware. The northern border of Delaware is this circular arc. And right at the place where the Arc of Delaware meets the Maryland border and the horizontal Pennsylvania border, right at that arc is the Minguannan, is the Minguannan Indian Town monument. And this area was where the Minguanon village was, somewhere in this area. Actually, I wanted to show you this because you can see the east branch of White Clay Creek coming down this way, and this is the west branch of the main creek. Now, when I showed you the monument, I was here at the London Tract Church, and I showed you the monument here, and then I came into the woods and I walked up White Clay Creek to this juncture of the two branches of the creek, and this is where I was hunting for artifacts. So that location where the two branches of the creek meet is actually where where the archaeologists think the main Indian town was. And the Indian town was huge. It actually covered at various points this entire location around this juncture. So, you know, the whole complex of sites is this this entire set of fields. They're all now like cornfields, essentially, which I showed you. Somewhere in this area is where the excavation that I'll show you next took place. You can figure it out from the paper I'll show you. I don't want to give you the exact location. Just, you know, you go figure it out if you really want to. But trust me when I say it's somewhere in this general location was where the excavation took place. And here's the paper showing you that, here's the paper that I found that I'll show you about this, this site. Now, you're going to have to bear with me a little bit because it's given in this double pages, so I'm going to be scrolling around a little bit. But you can see here's the site at the north, at the place where Maryland, Pennsylvania, and Delaware borders meet. You can see the site location there. This is the map where if you really study it, you can figure out where the actual location of the site was, but I'll let you figure that out yourself. This is a really beautiful introduction. It kind of gives you the overview. It says prehistoric overview of Pennsylvania and Delaware, and just how people moved into this landscape over thousands of years. It's very interesting, very well done. Now, one thing that this paper brings up is that, yes, the site is called Minguanon. The complex of villages at this, or sites at this location is called Minguanon, but it might have actually been named Opasiskunk. Opasiskunk. So in this paper, they talk about this theory that it was called Opasiskunk because here there's a historical, here I'll just read it. The area entered the historical literature through an Indian land sale by Lenape chief Kekarapan to William Penn. The following is taken from a deed dated to 1683. I, Kekarapan of Opasiskunk, for me and my heirs and assignees, I do hereby give grant unto William Penn, proprietor and governor of the province of Pennsylvania, his heirs, yada, 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 etc., etc. And that, basically that statement, Kekarapan of Opasiskunk, historians, at least according to this paper, are theorizing that Opasiskunk was a reference to this Indian town. That this is a map in the deed of the land sale, and you can see that I flipped it around so you can see the map a little better. You can see that this is right where White Clay Creek comes in, and this is the east branch of the creek. This is the west branch, and right here it says Indian Town. Okay, so there's this theory that Kekarapan was from Opasiskunk, and Opasiskunk was this Indian town on this map, which if you overlay on the map of creeks from a more modern map, you can see the location of the Indian town right there. Okay, so that's where that theory comes from. So it might not be named Minguanon. It actually, this site in particular, though it's part of the Minguanon complex, might have been called Opasiskunk. Okay, now here's a beautiful look. Here's the lay of the land of the actual archaeological site. They divided it up into grids. Here's White Clay Creek. The site is right on the banks of White Clay Creek. And there's a mill race where an old mill had siphoned off water from the creek. That's why this site survived agriculture and floods, but specifically agriculture, because this mill race basically carved off the site from the adjoining farmers' fields and protected it along the banks of White Clay Creek. So here's some beautiful pictures of the actual excavations by Elwood S. Wilkins. These are the banks of White Clay Creek, and the site was on the banks here. I can zoom in a little better so you can see that. This is the site right here on the banks of White Clay Creek. This is the team of archaeologists, and here they are at work. And you can see this is a profile cut of the soil. When they cut down into the soil, this is what it looked like. Here's the very precise gridding. And for the time that this was done, this was very high quality work. This was a very good, well done excavation. Here's more pictures of the cut. And then here's a stone hearth feature. You can see the stone in place where this would have been a fire pit, essentially. Here's another limestone hearth feature. These stones would have been used to make a fire ring of some sort, I believe, according to the caption, limestone hearth feature, right? Here's other pictures. Let's get down to this. Here's a beautiful, so this is where the artifacts actually come in. They started finding fragment steatite sherd feature. So that's a pottery. It's pottery. Here's another hearth feature. This is pottery, and then this is it's a projectile point in situ, meaning that's what it looked like when it came out of the ground. They hadn't touched it. They hadn't removed it yet. They just uncovered it. More ceramic shards. Look at all the ceramic shards in this photo. There were hundreds, if not thousands, of pieces of ceramic pulled out of this site. And this site, here's another fire pit. This site, because of the quality of some of the potsherds that were found, this is a bowl that was found. And now here's this is the high quality pottery that came out. Let me flip the image here so you can see it. Look at that. Look at that. That's a work of art. That's a beautiful pot from thousands of years ago. And you can see the corded where the way they designed it was they made marks along the side, and they also would have wrapped cords around it to imprint the pattern of the cordage on the pot as a decoration. And so this site, because it has such a well-preserved example of that type of pottery, it became known as the type site for this type of pottery. Minguanon pottery is what it's called, or Minguanon corded pottery is what it's become known as. And this is actually, I guess this vessel in particular is from Selden Island, which is a different location, but it has this kind of pottery, and this is a really good example of Minguanon pottery from Selden Island. So this is what the archaeologists were finding when they dug down into the soil at Minguanon. Now let's take a look here. This is a plot of the different features that were found in the grid of the site. You can see that a lot of the features were closer to the banks of White Clay Creek, and not as many features were found closer to the mill race, probably because the mill race disturbed it. Maybe. I'm just speculating there. And then there's a lot of interesting discussion of the pottery, of the different lithic artifacts. They said approximately 10,000 pieces of lithic debris were recovered during the excavation. They discuss bifacial tools, ground and pecked tools, fire-cracked rocks, and other things. And then there's this summary discussion, and I wanted to read this at the end here, at the end of the discussion section. It says the following: although 36CH3, Minguanon. Although the Minguanon site, or Opasiskunk site, the Opasiskunk site was the location of a variety of cultural activities during the thousands of years during which it witnessed Aboriginal activity. It has been primarily characterized as a late woodland macro band base camp of the Minguanon complex, as defined by Custer. That's interesting. Macro band base camp. So no evidence of house patterns, storage features, or defined midden areas were found that would have been expected in sedentary villages. He suggests that they were used primarily by smaller social units whose settlement pattern consisted of the occupation of a series of habitation sites. Okay. Although further investigation at the site may contribute only limited information to the archaeological record, a detailed analysis of the artifact assemblage, both ceramic and lithic, from Wilkins excavations should be undertaken, and radiocarbon dating should be considered. Now that is why I couldn't find a date for this site, because no radiocarbon dating has been done. Now they also finish up by saying, similar sites within the nearby White Clay Creek Valley should be sought and subjected to excavation. Further concern with the question of the Opasiskunk Indian Town should be given. It is likely that important information about the chronological development and ultimate disappearance of Aboriginal cultures within the Piedmont uplands can yet be obtained from protected sites, such as this site. Okay, so there you go. There's a little bit of information. Now, I do want to mention, I said that the Lenape vanished from this area around 1750, between 1730s and 1750. Now, vanished Indian is a bit of a myth. I want to clear up that I don't mean to perpetuate that. The Lenape are still there. There's still Lenape in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland. There are Lenape here. So I didn't mean to say that the Lenape completely evaporated or something like that. I just meant that this town, this complex, this area was no longer inhabited by Lenape, as far as I can tell. By the 1750s, there wouldn't have been anyone left. So that's all I meant. Not that Lenape vanished entirely. What else did I want to say? I think where I'm hunting for artifacts, I just want to point out that is a very good location. That's probably right in the area where the Indian town was. And so let's get back to that. We'll go back to the video. We live in an ancient land. That's what I always say. And yeah, so let's finish it off.
Now, I'm sure I'm walking past all kinds of flint and jasper and, all sorts of good rock tool making materials, but, you in the comments can let me know if you see anything good. I don't have time to look at how big this bank is. I got hours of work here if I'm gonna search it all. But I'll do a quick scan at least and see what I can find. Alright, now I always find it kind of takes a couple minutes for my eyes to adjust when I'm looking at the rocks and to kind of get into the mindset and it's like I know what I'm looking for, and it takes a few minutes to adjust and to get into that mindset. And as I was walking around, I found some things I wanted to show you. This is just a cool rock. Like, I don't know if you can see all the mica. I think my face is... Here, let me flip the camera around. There. Look at all the mica and embedding rocks embedded in this rock. It's just really interesting. Not an artifact though. But the other thing I found was this. Now I believe, okay, come on, focus, there we go. That is a hickory nut. Hickory dickory dock. Right? That's a hickory nut. And the Native Americans definitely ate hickory nuts. This was a staple all the way back into Paleolithic times, back to the last ice age. So this is an old food of the Native Americans from this part of the world. There you go, hickory. Well, that's the story of the White Clay Creek archaeological site. I hope you enjoyed this walk. My name's Sean. This is my channel, Saul Good, and I'll see you in the next one.